Standard prime lens. A prime lens has one fixed focal length and cannot zoom. That single constraint turns out to be one of its greatest strengths. Without a zoom mechanism inside, manufacturers can focus entirely on optical quality, and the result is usually a sharper, faster lens than a zoom at the same price point. The 50mm prime is the most common example, often called a nifty 50, and it has been a staple of photography since the early days of 35mm film. The field of view it produces is close to what the human eye naturally sees, which makes it a natural starting point for anyone learning to shoot. Wide-angle lens. A wide-angle lens captures a broader field of view than a standard lens, typically falling below 35mm in focal length. It lets you fit more of a scene into the frame without stepping further back, which makes it practical in tight spaces and useful when the environment itself is part of the story. Architecture photographers rely on wide-angle lenses to capture full building interiors. Landscape photographers use them to show sweeping terrain from edge to edge. The wider you go, the more the lens begins to stretch and distort elements near the edges of the frame, which can be used creatively or carefully avoided, depending on what you're after. Ultra-wide lens. An ultra-wide lens pushes the field of view even further, typically covering focal lengths below 24mm. The world starts to look noticeably different through one of these. Lines bend, spaces feel larger than they are, and foreground elements loom large relative to the background. Real estate photographers often use ultrawides to make rooms appear more spacious. In filmmaking, ultrawide lenses create a sense of environment and scale that draws the viewer into the scene. At the extreme end of this category, the distortion becomes so pronounced that it defines the entire look of the image. Fisheye lens. A fisheye lens takes the ultrawide concept to its most extreme form. These lenses typically cover a field of view between 100 and 180 degrees, producing heavy barrel distortion where straight lines curve dramatically outward from the center. The effect is immediately recognizable and has been used in skateboarding and action sports photography for decades, where the distortion adds energy and puts the viewer right in the middle of the action. Some fisheye lenses produce a circular image surrounded by black, while others fill the full frame. Neither version is trying to represent the world accurately. The distortion is the point. Telephoto lens. A telephoto lens compresses distance. It brings subjects that are physically far away closer in the frame, and it does so while also flattening the apparent depth between objects in the scene. Sports photographers use telephoto lenses to fill the frame with athletes from the sidelines. Wildlife photographers depend on them to capture animals without disturbing their behavior. The completion effect also has a quality that portrait and street photographers use intentionally, stacking elements in the background to create a layered cinematic look. Common telephoto focal lengths range from around 70mm up to 300mm for most practical work. Super telephoto lens. Super telephoto lenses begin roughly where standard telephotos leave off, starting around 400mm and extending to 600, 800, and beyond. These are the enormous white or gray lenses you see on the sidelines of professional sporting events and on wildlife photography expeditions. They require either a very fast shutter speed or some form of stabilization to use effectively, because any small movement is amplified significantly at these focal lengths. The cost and size of super telephoto lenses place them firmly in professional territory, and renting rather than buying is a common approach for photographers who only need them occasionally. Macro lens. A macro lens is designed to focus at very close distances, allowing it to reproduce small subjects at life size or near life size on the camera sensor. A single flower petal, the surface of a coin, the eye of an insect, subjects that are invisible in ordinary photography become entire landscapes through a macro lens. True macro lenses are typically labeled 1:1, meaning the subject is reproduced on the sensor at its actual physical size. Beyond the technical specification, macro lenses are also excellent portrait lenses, and many photographers use them as a primary lens even when they have no intention of shooting extreme close-ups. Zoom lens. A zoom lens covers a range of focal lengths in a single barrel, letting you change your composition without physically moving. A 24 to 70 millimeter zoom, for example, covers wide, standard, and short telephoto all in one lens. This flexibility is one of the main reasons zoom lenses became standard kit for working photographers and journalists who need to react quickly to changing situations. The trade-off has traditionally been that zooms sacrifice some optical quality and maximum aperture compared to primes of equivalent focal length. That gap has narrowed significantly with modern lens design, though a well-built prime will still outperform a zoom in most direct comparisons. Kit lens. A kit lens is the zoom lens that comes bundled with a camera body when sold as a package. Most commonly covering a range like 18 to 55 millimeters, it is designed to be an affordable, lightweight starting point that covers the most common focal lengths a beginner will use. Kit lenses have a reputation for being optically inferior, and while they do have real limitations, particularly in low light due to their narrow maximum aperture, they are more capable than their reputation suggests. Many photographers have produced excellent work on kit lenses, and understanding their limitations teaches you to work within constraints in a way that makes you a better photographer overall. Cine lens. Cine lenses are built for motion picture production. They share optical principles with photography lenses, but are engineered around the specific demands of filmmaking. Focus rings are geared for smooth, precise pulling by a dedicated focus puller. Aperture markings are in T-stops rather than f-stops, which measure actual light transmission rather than just the physical opening, making exposure more consistent when switching between lenses on set. Cine lenses are designed to minimize breathing, the slight change in field of view that happens when a photography lens is focused, which becomes distracting on video. The investment required for a proper Cine lens set runs well into the tens of thousands of dollars. Anamorphic lens. An anamorphic lens captures a wider image by optically squeezing it horizontally onto the sensor. When the footage is unsqueezed in post-production, it expands back out to a widescreen ratio that stretches beyond what a standard lens can capture. The format was originally developed for cinema in the 1950s as a way to project wide images without wasting screen space. Beyond the aspect ratio, anamorphic lenses produce a set of visual characteristics that have become deeply associated with cinematic storytelling: elongated oval bokeh, horizontal lens flares, and a particular quality of light rendering that digital correction cannot fully replicate. Many filmmakers choose anamorphic lenses specifically for those qualities, not just the wide frame. Probe lens. A probe lens is a long, narrow, tube-shaped lens designed to get a camera into spaces and positions that would be physically impossible with any conventional lens. The front element sits at the end of a thin barrel that can be just centimeters wide, allowing it to pass through tiny gaps, push through dense foliage, hover millimeters over a surface, or move through spaces that no human eye could naturally occupy. The footage produced looks like nothing else. The world appears vast, distances are wildly exaggerated, and ordinary objects take on an almost alien scale. Food cinematography teams use probe lenses to move through dishes as though flying through a landscape. Nature documentaries use them to enter insect colonies and ground-level environments. The depth of field is extremely shallow at close range, and the lenses require significant light due to their narrow aperture, often needing a powerful external light source pushed in alongside the lens itself. They are specialized, expensive, and not practical for everyday work, but when the shot calls for a perspective that nothing else can provide, there is no substitute.